So there's been a lot of videos out there of people starting gardens and spending tons of money on gardening infrastructure like fancy raised beds and the latest gardening gadgets, and they end up with like a couple peppers at the end of the season. And those kinds of videos have got me thinking about growing our own food in a lot of ways, because it kind of represents how I think most of America sees growing your own food right now, not 100 years ago, but right now. And first of all, those kinds of videos annoy me because it's totally possible to grow a ton of your own food in your backyard without spending a whole bunch of money on that kind of stuff. And it just requires some skill, some experience, and planning your crops out. And I do sell a gardening course, by the way, full disclosure, and the description, or the link for that, will be in the description, where I walk you through how to start a garden in your backyard in a space no bigger than 220 square feet. You could grow $1,100 worth of food in your first year. And I have a whole video on that I did a couple weeks ago that I will put around this video so you can see what I'm talking about with that. Even in a climate like ours, like Wyoming, we have 4 months to grow. Basically, May 21st to September 21st is the time that we have to grow a garden outside without a greenhouse or anything like that. And there's a way to do huge amount of production on a small scale, even in your backyard. So those videos annoy me because it's like those people just don't know much about growing their own food. But it also got me thinking a lot about why grow your own food, you know, besides just saving $1,100 at the grocery store. And to me, the answer is simple. Freedom. Freedom for feeding your family, where you don't depend on outside sources, at least as much. You know, going 100% self-sufficient on your own property is great, and it's a great goal to shoot for, but it's pretty unrealistic for a lot of people. But even if you're able to grow just your own carrots or something like that, or produce all of your own eggs, take a small piece of the greater food puzzle that you and your family eat every year and produce some of that. Just that little bit of self-sufficiency can start you on the path to growing a lot more of your own food. But that freedom part is such a big deal, because our food system, and I'm going to sound very millennial right now because I am a millennial, for full disclosure, but our food system is just so vulnerable, you know. And those videos that I'm talking about annoy me because it kind of implies, like, what's the point of doing all this when you could just go buy it at the store? Well, that system depends on labor that is very unsustainable, in my opinion. It's those people that do most of the harvesting for vegetables at the grocery store are bent over for 8 to 10 hours a day doing the same task. They'll be harvesting like a whole 10 acres of carrots or something, and or lettuce or bok choy or all the stuff that I grow here on this farm, but they'll be doing one task all day. Very back-breaking labor. And, you know, on our farm, we are very conscious of our backs because it's hard work doing all this vegetable stuff, and especially if you're doing it on a farm scale. So we try and balance it out so it's only a couple hours of that kind of stuff in the morning, and then the rest of the afternoon you're doing something easy, because it's just really hard on your body. And I think that labor force has been there for a long time, and basically America is dependent on that. And it's really tough. If those people don't need that job anymore, they do probably get paid $15 to $20 an hour. And I'm talking about the big vegetable farms in California, the South, all that kind of stuff. if they wake up one day and that need to do that work isn't there, there's not a lot of Americans that are going to do that work. You know, it's hard. I have a hard time finding labor around here and in Wyoming to do this kind of work. And I think it's a lot easier than a lot of other stuff like construction, or, you know, being in any kind of trade where you're working outside is much, much more difficult than what we do here. But anyway, that's a whole other story. The freedom part of this is a big deal. And in Wyoming, where I live, if there's a blizzard during the winter, easily you could go a couple days without getting anything fresh delivered to the grocery store, because there's a lot of mountain passes that those trucks have to go through, and they just can't drive when it's not safe. That's just part of the reality here. And if bigger picture stuff like fuel shortages start to happen, or trucker strikes start to happen, a place like where I live, where it's fairly isolated, where, you know, 8 hours from the nearest major American city, something like the size of Denver, we're pretty far away from a lot of the supply centers of America. There's going to be a lot of issues with getting something fresh on the store shelves. And stuff like vegetables will be the first thing to go, because vegetables just don't have a long shelf life, even from California. So that freedom thing is a big deal that is just missing in our culture right now. And it wasn't always like that, but and it's not missing in some other cultures. And part of the reason why I even have to have this conversation with at least America is, ever since World War II, I'd say, the big farms in California have taken over. California, the South, Florida, the big industrial vegetable farms have dominated and grocery stores have become part of our culture. And the smaller production model has kind of just gone away out of convenience. And, you know, back in World War II, there was a lot more people growing their own food out of necessity. But that knowledge has just basically been lost. There's very few people around here especially, but I mean, I think the rest of the whole country that actually are skilled enough at, that could actually grow enough carrots or something for themselves through the winter. And part of my mission in life, if you will, is to change that. And this farm is an example to people on how possible it is to do this in a very cold climate, a difficult climate. You know, every climate has its challenges, but ours, we have the shortest growing season in America, 120 days. If you look up, Wyoming has the shortest average frost-free days in the country. And so basically, if we could do it here, you can do it anywhere, is my mindset. Granted, that it's a little more complicated than that. I know that even in a place that like South Carolina, where they have probably over 200 growing frost-free days a year, there's lots of challenges when it's really hot. There's all sorts of pests and humidity issues that we don't have to deal with here. So, you know, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But the point I'm making is, it's possible to make a decentralized food system happen again. And there's all sorts of new innovations happening with this stuff right now too. I mean, the guys around the country like Never Sink Farm, or what's that one in Arizona? There's a whole bunch of small farms like this around the country that are really innovating with the tools, making it possible to do this, and greenhouse growing. Guys like Elliot Coleman have really pushed the envelope on that. JM Fortier as well. Those guys are all kind of northern growers, but there's guys in the South doing it, and in Arizona. They're really innovating and pushing the envelope on, you know, what kind of food can be grown in very extreme climates. And that's just on the market farm scale, you know, even, and there's tons of people gardening in those places as well that are innovating. But, it's not really part of the mainstream yet. I think it's getting there, but I really want to be an example to people, and show them what's possible in at least a cold climate like ours. So, for example, we're in a caterpillar tunnel here. We have two caterpillar tunnels on the farm. These are very inexpensive, cheap greenhouses. We were able to keep about 8 of the 10, or no, so like 15 out of the 20 beds in production through this winter, and we had temperatures down to -30 Fahrenheit. The greenhouse next to me had 5 beds of winter carrots and 5 beds of winter spinach. All of them survived -30-degree temperatures, and we were harvesting after that, no problem. Not exactly during -30, but there's no heat in these. They were only protected with row cover, and there was other crops that we had too. We had miner's lettuce, we had kale, we had some baby kale, stuff like that. We were able to harvest through the winter, which is pretty extreme because Wyoming has an extremely cold winter. And those kinds of techniques can be applied to a garden setting, or even, you could put up a greenhouse like this on your homestead for pretty inexpensive and get the same kind of results. And I don't know if that's even ever been done in a place like Wyoming before. Wyoming is just, very sparsely populated, not a whole lot of gardening history, period. But the point is, there's some pretty cool things you can do with these techniques if you apply them. For example, we've got 3 beds of carrots here. They're all 50-foot beds by 2.5 feet. So that's 125 square feet each. So that equals to 375 square feet. That 375 square feet is going to yield about 500 pounds of carrots. That's a lot in a very small space. And so in our gardening course that I have a link to in the description, I explain how to do that on a garden scale. Like 220 square feet, you could do about 30 to 40 pounds in a 10-foot bed. The same concept can be applied to your garden. And if more people in America did that, if like 10% of the population did that, there would be a huge change in our dependence on big growers like California or Florida and stuff like that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is I want to live in a world where decentralized food is normal, and I don't even have to have this conversation.
So when I talk about freedom, I'm not just talking about the money part, but that self-sufficiency from outside sources, but also you have freedom over your health when you're able to grow your own vegetables and food, because the stuff that you buy in the store has a lot of problems. I'm sure there's a lot of content out there already about stuff like GMOs and vaccinated cattle and stuff like that. But there's a part that I don't see talked about very much that's, with vegetables at least, is freshness. When you're growing your own vegetables and harvesting it fresh from your backyard, or you're buying it from a farm like me, or like mine, that food is going to be days old at most. And that there's a life force to this kind of food that doesn't exist on stuff from California that's been shipped from long ways away, and it's 10 days old by the time you get it. There's cameras out there, and I don't remember the name of the camera right now, but there's a camera that can take a photo of vegetables and can be able to tell that a vegetable that was grown organically and a certain level of freshness has, and compared to something that's grown non-organically with something that's shipped from a long ways away, the light, or in other words, I'm calling it the life force, biophotons is a word I've heard thrown around there. The life force in the organic fresh vegetable is 3 times or something like that more than the stuff from the store. You know, I don't know the exact numbers, but the point I'm making is it's far more life-giving to consume vegetables that are fresh like that. If you look at some of the raw vegan people out there, and I'm not a raw vegan, and I'm not advocating that people be raw vegan, but I am interested in the people that are raw vegan, because if you look at them, they're drinking fresh vegetable juice and eating fresh vegetables as a lifestyle 100%. And a 50-year-old raw vegan can look like a 25-year-old because of that life force they're constantly putting into their body. And I've just experimented enough with juicing my own vegetables in high season when we have an abundance of stuff like cucumbers and carrots and stuff. And it feels like electricity is going through my body. There is a certain level of life force that is changing me. And I don't really know how to articulate it better than that. I'm not a doctor or a scientist or anything like that, but I know there's something to this. And, you know, it's hard to quantify what I'm talking about, which is probably why nobody talks about this. You know, because you can't really use science very much to explain this, other than just like, okay, I look at this person, they look like they're on fire all the time with life force and happy, and I want to be like them, you know. So again, I don't want to be a raw vegan necessarily, but there's something to that. And this growing your own food concept can change the way, if you start making this a part of your lifestyle, you're just going to start noticing there's a certain more spring to your step when you're eating this kind of stuff on a regular basis. And you know, that's a kind of level of freedom that you're not going to get from a pill from a doctor, or definitely not from the stuff from the store. You know, yeah, if you eat raw vegan from the store, you're still going to be better off than eating, like, you know, nachos every day or something. But there's just another level of that life force you get when you're eating this kind of stuff all the time. And I don't eat it all the time. We can't really eat this crazy fresh all the time here in Wyoming, but I mean, actually you can. We can have lots of spinach and stuff like that, but I'm not able to juice vegetables in December here. But we still eat a lot more fresh stuff than most people, I think. But that's another aspect of this freedom part that I don't hear very many people talking about.
So to hammer home the point of how much food you could grow on a really small space, this farm is less than a half an acre of land in full production. So with that land, we're going to produce over $100,000 of vegetables this year. The same concept can be applied to your 220 square foot garden or whatever size you have, you know. But 220 square feet is something I think almost everybody could fit in a quarter acre lot or something. And the other part of this freedom thing I'm talking about is the community. This farm, we've only been really in production since about 2020, basically 2021. But ever since I've been going to the farmers market, I've built relationships with the customers there. We probably only feed about 300 people. Pretty small amount. So it's not like if the food trucks stopped coming tomorrow, we would actually be able to feed this entire place. No way. But my vision, I guess, is inspiring much more people to do this. Many more farms to start, many more gardens to start. Because it's going to take an army to really make that decentralized food system happen. It's not going to happen by a handful of people like me. But you can still produce an incredible amount of food on a small space, but the community part of it is another massive benefit to a decentralized food system. Of those 300 people that I serve, or that we serve on this farm and feed, The ones that have been supporting me for a very long time, which basically they're the ones that have funded this farm, because this is a business and it doesn't exist without customers or a revenue stream. If they called me and they needed help with something, I would show up. Not literally every single one, but the ones that have been very, very supportive, yeah, I'm going to bend over backwards for them. And that's just not happening with a big food system like we have now. There's no relationship there. And even without small farms, if the kind of people, the kind of numbers I'm talking about started a garden, those communities would form also, because when you start a garden, you run into problems. There's lots of problems with growing in your specific climate that you're only going to figure out by dealing with them. But once a lot more people do this, there's going to be the information on how to solve those problems circulating a lot more. You know, right now there's only a handful of people around here really growing food in a garden scale or a farm scale. And so there's just not a lot of people that have the knowledge. And I want to live in a world where that knowledge is normal. It's not really something you have to go to a special online forum to find. You know, there's so many skills that you learn from growing your own food above and beyond the actual crops that you produce. You know, I can look at a piece of land and tell you how many pounds of carrots that I could grow in that specific piece of land in a specific amount of time. If you started a garden, after a couple of years, you could do the same thing. And you'll learn simple plumbing things that you're going to have to deal with, just how to get the right fittings for your hose and stuff like that. You know, if you start a farm like this, you're going to learn a lot about all sorts of utility things like electric and plumbing and digging and building, you know, stuff that I never learned in school, at least where I grew up. I grew up in suburbia where, you know, these kinds of skills are not very mainstream. Most people kind of just do an office job and that's about it. That's the majority of the people that I grew up with are ending up doing is office jobs. And so getting back on the land teaches you about working with the seasons. You're going to be paying attention to the weather a lot more. You know, I noticed things about the weather that I never would have paid attention to 10 years ago. You know, I could tell the difference between this year and last year just because I've been doing this. This season has been phenomenally warm compared to last year. Because it actually affects my business, those kinds of things. And if you start a garden, it will affect your crops as well, you know? So there's so many benefits to this decentralized food system, this growing your own food in some way, shape, or form concept that I'm talking about, whether it's buying some chickens and producing the eggs or growing some of your own herbs, you know, starting small and producing a little bit of what your family likes to eat. And that sense of confidence you're going to have too is just so, you can't put a price on that. So to me, the reason why you want to grow your own food on a farm scale, a homestead scale, on a garden scale is freedom. And that freedom comes in many different forms. It's not just one thing, but it's a kind of freedom that I don't think has been a part of our culture for a long time. And I would like to see it become part of our culture. So that was a little bit of a rant, but it's something that's been on my mind for a very long time. And I wanted to get it out there and, you know, hopefully, you know, if this is the kind of stuff you want to hear about, then definitely hit that subscribe button. If it's not, no worries. I'm not the guy for you, but I hope this gets somebody's wheels turning, I guess. And if you are interested in growing your own food in a garden scale, that gardening course that I have with Homestead Mentors is a great resource. A lot of information in that. It's 7 hours of content. I go over everything you need to know from starting your garden, plant spacing, crop planting, watering, crop selection, all that kind of stuff to be able to grow a lot of food for your family this year. There's still plenty of time to do that. So if you're interested, give that link in the description a look. And then we also have monthly webinars where I do a free webinar and you can hear me talk a little bit about gardening. We're going to have one coming up this Monday, May 6th at 7:30 p.m. You're welcome to sign up for that. We're going to do at least another one after that, maybe a few more throughout the summer. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the